The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the void like a metal city. Ships from 100 different worlds came and went from its docking bays every day. The Zephyrian Galactic Empire had built this place to show their power to everyone who visited. The station was so big that it had its own weather systems inside. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the small window of the human ship called Olive Branch. She watched the station grow larger as they approached. The metal walls were covered with symbols and lights that meant nothing to her yet, but she would learn them. That was her job. Nervous? Asked Captain Rodriguez from behind her. Sarah turned around and smiled. Excited, she said. This is what we trained for. Captain Rodriguez shook her head. They think we're going to beg for scraps. The intelligence reports all say the same thing. Every new species that meets the Empire ends up as servants. Maybe, Sarah said, but we're not every species. The docking process took 3 hours. The Empire wanted to show that everything here moved at their speed, not anyone else's. Sarah used the time to review her files one more time. The Zephyrians liked order and ceremony. They believed in genetic castes where your DNA decided your job. The Emperor had ruled for over 300 years, and his family had ruled for 2,000. When the airlock finally opened, 6 tall aliens waited for them. The Zephyrians looked like lizards that had learned to walk upright. Their scales changed color slightly when they moved. The leader wore purple robes that sparkled with tiny lights. I am Sub-Minister Kreltas, the leader said through a translation device. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. You will follow proper protocols, Sarah stepped forward. She wore a simple blue business suit and carried a small briefcase. Ambassador Sarah Chen, representing Earth and humanity. Thank you for allowing us to visit your beautiful station. The Zephyrians looked confused. Most new species either cowered in fear or tried to act tough. Sarah did neither. She was polite but not afraid. Sub-Minister Kreltas led them through corridors that seemed designed to make visitors feel small. The ceilings were 30 feet high. Massive statues of past emperors lined the walls. Everything was made from black stone that reflected the overhead lights. You will be housed in Section 7 Beta, Kreltas explained. Temporary quarters for minor diplomatic contact. You will remain there until the Foreign Ministry decides your status. How long might that take? Sarah asked. However long it takes, Kreltas replied. Sarah smiled. Of course. We appreciate your patience with us. The temporary quarters were actually quite nice. 3 rooms with human-style furniture that someone had clearly researched and prepared. There was even a small kitchen with food that looked almost like earth vegetables. After the Zephyrians left, Captain Rodriguez grabbed Sarah's arm. They're treating us like every other species that comes begging. This isn't what we planned. Actually, Sarah said, unpacking her briefcase, this is exactly what we planned. They think they understand the situation. That gives us time. Time for what? Sarah pulled out a small tablet and activated it. The screen showed organizational charts and cultural notes. Time to learn how their system really works. Time to meet people. Time to understand what they need. The next morning, Sarah requested a meeting with someone from the Foreign Ministry. The request went through 7 different offices before reaching Assistant Deputy Minister Velkar. He was young for a Zephyrian, only about 60 years old, and his scales were bright green instead of the darker colors of higher-ranking officials. The human wishes to discuss what? Velkar asked his secretary. Formal protocols for establishing diplomatic relations, the secretary replied. She also asked about cultural education opportunities. Velkar was curious. Most species either demanded immediate attention or hid in their quarters. Send her to conference room 12. I will meet with her briefly. Sarah arrived at the meeting with a small gift. It was a wooden box containing earth coffee beans and a simple brewing device. A small token of friendship, she explained through the translator. Velkar examined the gift carefully. What is the purpose of these seeds? They make a beverage that helps with mental clarity and energy. Many humans start their day with coffee. I thought you might enjoy trying something from our world. The Zephyrian was puzzled. In his experience, gifts from new species were either valuable items meant as bribes or primitive trinkets that showed how backward the species was. Coffee was neither. I understand you wish to discuss protocols, Velkar said. Yes, Sarah replied. We want to make sure we follow all proper procedures. Could you help me understand how diplomatic relations typically develop? What steps should we expect? For the next hour, Velkar found himself explaining the entire process of how the Empire absorbed new species. Sarah asked thoughtful questions and took careful notes. She seemed genuinely interested in understanding their system rather than complaining about it. Most species are impatient, Velkar admitted near the end of the meeting. They want immediate answers. We understand that good relationships take time, Sarah said. We're willing to wait and learn. After Sarah left, Velkar sat in his office thinking. The human had been different from what he expected. She was smart and polite, but there was something else. She had asked questions that made him think about things he had never questioned before. Why did the Empire always assume new species would become servants? What if some species could be partners instead? Over the next few weeks, Sarah established a routine. She requested meetings with different departments to learn about Empire procedures. She always brought small gifts: coffee, chocolate, simple Earth games. She never asked for anything except information and understanding. The Zephyrians began to talk about the human ambassador. She was polite to everyone, from high-ranking ministers to janitors. She learned names and remembered personal details. When Sub-Minister Krelthas mentioned that his daughter was studying art, Sarah brought pictures of Earth art to their next meeting. Why does she care about our personal lives? Asked Minister Torvald during a staff meeting. It appears to be a human cultural trait, replied Velkar. They form personal connections as part of diplomatic relations. Strange, Torvald muttered, but harmless enough. What they didn't realize was that Sarah was building something much more important than personal connections. She was creating a network of people who saw her as a friend, rather than a problem to be solved. Foreign Minister Vexhai Morthul finally agreed to meet with Sarah after 6 weeks. He was an ancient Zephyrian with dark purple scales and eyes like yellow diamonds. His office was larger than Sarah's entire quarters. Human, he said without looking up from his work. You have been patient. This is noted. What does your species offer the Empire? Sarah had prepared for this question. We offer partnership, Your Excellence. Our species has experience in organization, problem-solving, and cooperation. We believe we could contribute to the Empire's continued success. Morthul finally looked at her. Partnership? You understand that new species become client states. They serve the Empire. We understand that as the usual arrangement, Sarah said carefully, but perhaps there are other possibilities worth exploring. The foreign minister's scales darkened slightly, which Sarah had learned meant either anger or deep thought. You will wait while the Empire considers your species' fate. That is how this works. Of course, Sarah replied. We are honored by your consideration. As Sarah left the meeting, she was not discouraged. Everything was going exactly according to plan. The Empire thought they were in control, making decisions about humanity's future, but Sarah knew something they didn't. The best way to change a system was from the inside, one relationship at a time. 3 months had passed since Sarah Chen arrived at Nexus Prime. Her temporary quarters had slowly transformed into something that looked more like a permanent embassy. She had managed to acquire better furniture, a larger food preparation area, and even some plants that reminded her of earth ferns. The most surprising addition was a small, furry creature that the Zephyrians called a Kulith. It looked like a cross between a cat and a ferret with 6 legs and soft purple fur. The Kulith had wandered into her quarters one day and simply decided to stay. When she asked about it, Assistant Deputy Minister Velkar had looked shocked. The Kulith chose you? He asked. They are sacred animals. They only bond with individuals they sense have pure intentions. Sarah scratched behind the creature's ears. Well, I'm honored. What should I call him? You name it yourself. The Kulith will accept the name if it approves of you. She decided to call him Coffee, because his purple fur reminded her of the dark roast she missed from Earth. The name seemed to amuse the Zephyrians she met. Her daily routine had become predictable in the best way. Each morning she would prepare coffee for herself and tea for any visitors. The smell of brewing coffee had begun to attract curious Zephyrians who worked nearby. They would stop by to ask questions about human culture or to share stories about their own lives. Sarah learned that junior clerk Zixanal was studying to become an engineer, but couldn't advance because his genetic caste was classified as administrative only. She discovered that Security Officer Morden had written poetry in his spare time but couldn't share it because artistic expression was restricted to the artist caste. That seems like a waste. Sarah mentioned during one of their conversations, on Earth anyone can pursue their interests alongside their main job. How does your society function without genetic castes? asked Zixnall. Sarah poured him another cup of coffee. We believe people should have the opportunity to develop their talents regardless of their family background. It makes our society stronger when everyone can contribute their best abilities. These conversations were spreading throughout the station. Zephyrians who had never questioned their system began asking each other why genetic destiny was considered natural law. Sub-Minister Krelthas had started visiting Sarah's quarters regularly. What began as official check-ins had become something more like friendship. He brought his daughter's artwork to show Sarah, and Sarah shared pictures and stories from Earth. Your species seems very flexible, Krelthas observed one day. You adapt to our customs, but you also maintain your own identity. We believe adaptation and staying true to yourself can happen at the same time, Sarah replied. Change doesn't have to mean losing what makes you special. Coffee, the Clulith purred from his favorite spot on Sarah's lap. Even he seemed to approve of the conversation. The foreign ministry was growing frustrated with the human situation. Sarah Chen had been patient exactly as requested, but she had also been busy. Reports were coming in from all over the station about the human ambassadors' activities. She is teaching card games to our staff, complained Security Chief Rorthak. During a ministry meeting, she is discussing philosophical concepts with junior personnel, added Administrative Director Pel9 Foreign. Minister Morthul reviewed the reports with growing confusion. Every single interaction had been completely appropriate according to Empire protocols. Sarah had broken no rules, violated no customs, and caused no problems. But somehow she was having an effect on his staff that he couldn't quite define. What exactly is she doing wrong? He asked. The room fell silent. Nobody could point to anything inappropriate. She brings gifts, offered Pel9 weakly. Gifts are part of diplomatic protocol. Morthul replied. She asks questions about our procedures. Learning about our system is expected from visiting diplomats. She treats lower caste personnel with the same respect as higher-ranking officials. Morthul paused. Is that against regulations? Another silence. It wasn't against regulations because no previous species had ever acted that way. The Empire's rules were designed to handle species that either submitted immediately or caused obvious problems. They had no procedures for dealing with someone who followed all the rules while somehow changing everything. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her patient work. She had begun hosting what she called cultural exchange sessions twice a week. Any station personnel could attend to learn about human customs, sample Earth food, or simply practice speaking different languages. These sessions had become surprisingly popular. Zephyrians who had worked on the same station for decades were meeting each other for the first time. Guards talked to clerks. Engineers shared ideas with maintenance staff. The rigid caste system that normally prevented such interactions seemed to dissolve during Sarah's gatherings. How do humans organize their work teams? Asked Engineer Sector during one session. We usually put together people with different skills who can help each other, Sarah explained. A good team has diverse perspectives and abilities. But how do you maintain order without clear hierarchy? Sarah smiled. We've found that people work better when they feel respected and valued. Clear communication and shared goals are more effective than fear. These ideas were revolutionary to the Zephyrians. Their entire society was built on the belief that order required strict hierarchy and genetic destiny. The concept that cooperation could be more effective than control was almost impossible to understand. But the evidence was right in front of them. Sarah's informal gatherings ran smoothly. Problems were solved quickly through discussion rather than orders. People seemed happier and more productive when they felt heard and respected. Velkar had become one of Sarah's most frequent visitors. He found himself looking forward to their conversations more than his official duties. I have been thinking about what you said regarding individual development, he told her one day. In my spare time, I have been studying xenobiology. It is not my assigned field, but I find it fascinating. That's wonderful, Sarah encouraged. Learning new things keeps the mind active and creative. But it serves no official purpose. My caste is designated for administrative work only. Sarah looked at him thoughtfully. What if your xenobiology knowledge could improve administrative procedures? Understanding different species better might help with diplomatic relations. Velkar had never considered that his personal interests might have professional value. In Empire thinking, you did your assigned job and nothing else. The idea that diverse knowledge could strengthen performance in any role was completely foreign. But as he thought about it, He realized Sarah was right. His unofficial studies had already helped him understand the humans better than his colleagues did. Maybe there was value in encouraging people to develop multiple talents. Foreign Minister Morthul finally decided to address the situation directly. He called Sarah to his office for a formal meeting. "Human Chen," he began, "you have been on this station for 3 months. You have made no formal requests for your species status. You have not demanded meetings with higher authorities. What exactly are you doing here?" Sarah sat calmly in the chair across from his massive desk. Coffee the Coolith had somehow managed to come with her and was sitting quietly on the floor. "I am learning about your magnificent civilization," she replied, "and I hope I am sharing some small insights about human culture in return." "Learning what specifically?" "How your society functions, how decisions are made, how people work together, how problems are solved. Your empire has lasted for 2,000 years, which suggests you have developed very effective systems." Morthul was suspicious. "To what purpose?" "Understanding," Sarah said simply. "If our species are to have a relationship, we should understand each other." "And what have you learned?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. "I have learned that the Empire values order, tradition, and stability. I have also learned that your people are intelligent, creative, and capable of great kindness. Many of them have interests and abilities that extend beyond their official roles." The foreign minister's scales darkened. "You speak of matters outside your concern." "I apologize if I have overstepped," Sarah said politely. "I only mean that human societies benefit when people can develop their full potential. I wondered if the Empire might also benefit from such an approach." Morthul stared at her for a long moment. This conversation was heading toward dangerous territory. Questions about the caste system struck at the foundation of Empire society. "You will continue to wait for the Empire's decision regarding your species," he said finally. "Of course," Sarah replied. "We remain honored by your consideration." As she left the office, Sarah knew that her time was running out. The Empire was beginning to understand that her presence was changing things. Soon they would either embrace that change or try to stop it. But the seeds had already been planted. All across Nexus Prime, Zephyrians were asking new questions and imagining different possibilities. The real work was just beginning. Sarah Chen had been waiting for 4 months when the message finally arrived. Emperor Korthas the Eternal would grant her an audience. The news spread through Nexus Prime like wildfire, because no representative from a new species had met directly with the Emperor in over 500 years. Foreign Minister Morthul delivered the news personally, his dark purple scales shifting to an even deeper color that Sarah had learned indicated extreme seriousness. "You will have exactly 30 minutes, he informed her. "You will present your species offering to the Empire. The Emperor will then decide your fate." "I'm honored by this opportunity," Sarah replied. "What form should our offering take?" "Most species offer tribute. Valuable resources, advanced technology, or military service. What does humanity bring to the Empire?" Sarah smiled and opened her briefcase. Inside were several data tablets and a thick folder of printed documents. "We bring expertise in systems optimization." Morthul's scales flickered with confusion. "Systems optimization?" "Making things work better," Sarah explained. "Human civilization has survived and thrived by constantly improving our methods of organization, production, and cooperation. We believe this expertise could benefit the Empire." The foreign minister was skeptical. The Empire had perfected their systems over 2 millennia. What could a primitive species possibly teach them? But he said nothing. The Emperor would decide. The Imperial throne room was designed to overwhelm visitors. The ceiling soared 200 feet overhead, supported by columns carved from single massive crystals. The walls were covered with murals depicting the Empire's greatest victories. At the far end, the golden throne sat on a platform that required visitors to climb 100 steps to reach it. Emperor Korthas the Eternal was ancient even by Zephyrian standards. He had ruled for over 3 centuries, and his scales had turned the deep black color that marked extreme age and wisdom. His eyes were like silver fire, and when he spoke, his voice filled the entire chamber. Sarah walked calmly up the steps, carrying her briefcase and data tablets. Behind her, Coffee the Coolith followed quietly. The Coolith's presence caused whispers among the assembled court officials because the sacred animals rarely appeared in formal ceremonies. "Human Sarah Chen," the Emperor's voice boomed. You have waited patiently for this audience. Your species seeks what from the Zephyrian Empire? Sarah reached the top of the steps and bowed respectfully. Your Imperial Majesty, humanity seeks the opportunity to contribute to your empire's continued success and prosperity. Contribute how? Sarah activated one of her tablets. A holographic display appeared showing a complex organizational chart. We have spent our time here studying your governmental structure. We have identified several areas where small improvements could increase efficiency and productivity significantly. The assembled court officials began murmuring. No species had ever presumed to suggest improvements to empire systems. Several high-ranking ministers looked offended, but Emperor Cortez leaned forward with interest. Show me these improvements. Sarah's presentation was unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. She had somehow mapped their entire governmental structure in just 4 months. Her chart showed information flow patterns, decision-making bottlenecks, and resource allocation inefficiencies that even the Empire's own analysts had never identified. Your taxation system requires 17 different approvals for standard collection procedures, Sarah explained. By streamlining this to 7 approvals and implementing automated checking systems, you could reduce processing time by 60% while maintaining all security protocols. She showed similar improvements for military supply chains, colonial administration, and interstellar communication networks. Each suggestion was practical, detailed, and demonstrated deep understanding of Empire operations. How did you acquire this information? Demanded Internal Security Minister Kelvarth. Through conversation and observation, Sarah replied calmly. Everyone I met was very helpful in explaining how things work. I simply listened and took notes. The Emperor studied the holographic displays with growing fascination. The suggested improvements were brilliant. They addressed problems he had known existed, but had never found solutions for. These optimizations would require changes to established procedures, he said slowly. Yes, Your Majesty, change can be challenging, but the benefits would be substantial. Increased efficiency means more resources for expansion, better services for citizens, and stronger overall stability. And humanity would provide expertise to implement these changes? Sarah nodded. We would be honored to share our knowledge. We propose a cultural exchange program where human specialists could work with Empire departments to implement improvements while learning from your advanced systems. Foreign, Minister Morthal stepped forward. Your Majesty, this is highly irregular. No client species has ever been granted such access to our operations. Emperor Cortez was quiet for a long moment, studying the data displays. The improvements Sarah suggested could solve problems that had plagued the Empire for centuries. The potential benefits were enormous. What guarantees do we have of human loyalty? He asked. We believe loyalty grows from mutual benefit and respect, Sarah replied. If working together makes both our civilizations stronger and more prosperous, loyalty will develop naturally. This answer surprised the court. Most species offered immediate submission and promises of eternal service. The human spoke of partnership and mutual benefit as if she considered her species equal to the Empire. You do not offer submission, the Emperor observed. We offer cooperation, Sarah said. We believe partnerships between equals are stronger and more stable than relationships based on dominance. The throne room fell completely silent. No one had ever spoken to the Emperor about equality. The concept was almost unthinkable. But as Cortez studied the optimization plans, he realized something important. The human suggestions weren't about changing who was in charge. They were about making the existing system work better. The Empire would still be the Empire, just more efficient and effective. These human specialists, he said finally, they would work under Empire supervision? Absolutely, Sarah confirmed. They would be advisors and consultants, helping to implement improvements while respecting all Empire authority and protocols. And if their methods prove ineffective? Then we would modify or abandon them. We believe in testing and adjusting based on results. The Emperor made his decision. We will authorize a limited trial program. 12 human specialists will be permitted to work with selected Empire departments for 1 standard year. If the results prove beneficial, we will consider expanding the arrangement. The court officials looked shocked. Some appeared pleased by the potential for improvement, while others seemed concerned about allowing outsiders into Empire operations. Thank you, Your Majesty, Sarah said. bowing again. "We will not disappoint your confidence in us." As she descended the steps, Sarah felt coffee brush against her leg. The Culith seemed to sense that something important had just happened. Foreign Minister Morthul approached her as she reached the bottom. "You realize what you have done?" he asked quietly. "I hope we have taken the first step toward a beneficial relationship," Sarah replied. "You have convinced the Emperor to let your species into the heart of Empire operations. If this goes badly, it will not end well for humanity." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "We understand the responsibility. We won't abuse your trust." But as she left the throne room, Sarah knew the real work was just beginning. The Empire had agreed to let humans help with efficiency improvements. What they didn't understand was that truly efficient systems were also more fair, more flexible, and more responsive to the needs of all participants. By helping the Empire work better, humanity would inevitably help it become something different, something better. The first human specialist would arrive within weeks. Each had been carefully chosen not just for their technical expertise, but for their ability to build relationships and inspire positive change. Dr. Marcus Webb, a former therapist who specialized in organizational psychology. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, a logistics expert who had revolutionized supply systems for the Earth military. Professor Ahmed Hassan, a political scientist who understood how to modify power structures without destroying them. They would come as advisors and consultants. But they would work as teachers and friends, showing the Empire's people new possibilities for their lives and their society. The Emperor thought he was hiring efficiency experts. What he was actually doing was inviting a quiet revolution that would transform his empire from within. And Sarah Chen was just getting started. 6 months after the Emperor's decision, 12 human specialists were scattered across the Zephyrian Empire like seeds in fertile soil. Each had been assigned to different departments in different worlds, officially serving as efficiency consultants. In reality, they were quietly revolutionizing everything they touched. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the medical bay of the Imperial military base on Kepler 7th, watching Zephyrian soldiers participate in something that had never existed before, a mental health support group. The concept had been so foreign to the Empire that they didn't even have words for it in their language. "Today we discuss combat stress management," Marcus announced to the group of 20 soldiers. His translator rendered the words into Zephyrian, though he had been learning their language directly. "Who would like to share their experiences from last week's exercise?" Commander Velthos, a grizzled veteran with battle scars across his dark green scales, raised his hand. 6 months ago, he would have rather died than admit to having emotional difficulties. Now he spoke openly about the nightmares that had plagued him since the rebellion of Sector 12. "The breathing techniques you taught us helped," Velthos said. "When the memories came back, I could manage them better." Other soldiers nodded in agreement. The humans' methods seemed like magic to them. Instead of telling them to ignore their problems or push through pain, Marcus taught them to understand and work with their minds. Mental health affects physical performance, Marcus had explained to skeptical military leadership. Soldiers who process trauma properly are more effective in combat and more reliable in crisis situations. The results spoke for themselves. Units that participated in Marcus's programs showed improved performance ratings, reduced disciplinary problems, and better teamwork scores. What the military didn't fully understand was that soldiers who learned to value their own mental health also began to question why their society ignored the mental health of everyone else. Meanwhile, on the industrial world of Foundry Prime, Captain Lisa Rodriguez was transforming how the Empire moved resources across space. The Zephyrian supply system had worked the same way for centuries. Centralized control, rigid schedules, and hierarchical approval processes that created massive delays. Why does a request for medical supplies to Outer Colony 7 need approval from 17 different offices? Lisa asked during a meeting with Supply Corps leadership. Security protocols, replied General Morquez. We must ensure proper authorization and prevent waste. I understand the need for security, Lisa said, pulling up her data displays. But look at these numbers. Medical emergencies on Outer Colony 7 have a 48-hour response time because of approval delays. We could maintain security with only 5 authorization points and reduce response time to 8 hours. Her presentation showed detailed analysis of supply flows, bottleneck identification, and proposed solutions that would maintain security while dramatically improving efficiency. But more importantly, her changes required local commanders to make more decisions independently. This gives individual station commanders significant autonomy, observed Logistics Director Pelthak. Autonomy improves response time and allows for local adaptation, Lisa explained. When people closer to problems can make decisions, solutions are faster and more effective. The Empire had always believed that central control was necessary for order. Lisa was proving that distributed decision-making could be more effective while still maintaining overall coordination. Her logistics improvements were saving lives and resources, but they were also teaching Empire personnel to think independently and take initiative. On the academic world of Scholars Rest, Professor Ahmed Hassan was having the most dangerous conversations in the Empire. He had been assigned to help optimize the Imperial Academy's educational systems, but his real work was much more fundamental. Today we examine leadership theory, he announced to a class of future Imperial administrators. These young Zephyrians would eventually govern worlds and make decisions affecting billions of lives. Traditional Empire leadership follows the command hierarchy model, Ahmed continued. Orders flow down from superior to subordinate based on genetic caste and rank. This system provides clear structure and maintains order. The students nodded. This was exactly what they expected to hear. However, Ahmed said, research from multiple civilizations suggests that other leadership models can be more effective in certain situations. Who can tell me what problems might arise from purely hierarchical leadership? Student Kernal raised her hand tentatively. If lower-ranked individuals have important information, the hierarchy might prevent it from reaching decision-makers. Excellent observation, Ahmed said. What other challenges might exist? The discussion that followed would have been considered treasonous 6 months earlier. Students talked about situations where rigid hierarchy prevented good solutions. They discussed the waste that occurred when intelligent people couldn't contribute ideas because of their genetic caste. Ahmed never directly criticized the Empire. Instead, he taught them to think critically about different approaches to organization and leadership. He showed them examples from human history, from other species, and even from successful Empire operations that had accidentally used non-hierarchical methods. The goal is not to abandon structure, he emphasized, but to understand when different approaches might serve the Empire better. His students began to imagine possibilities that their society had never allowed them to consider. What if the best ideas could come from anyone, regardless of their birth caste? What if leadership was based on ability and knowledge rather than genetics? Back on Nexus Prime, Sarah Chen monitored reports from all 12 human specialists. Each was succeeding beyond their official goals, but more importantly, each was planting ideas that were spreading throughout Empire society. Foreign Minister Morthul had begun visiting her quarters regularly, though their conversations had evolved far beyond diplomatic protocol. Your specialists are effective, he admitted during one of their coffee sessions. Military performance is improving. Supply efficiency has increased by 30%. Academic scores are reaching record levels. I'm pleased the programs are successful, Sarah replied, scratching coffee behind the ears. The Q-Lith had become something of a station mascot, beloved by Zephyrians who had never been allowed to show affection for animals before. But they are also changing things, Morthul continued carefully. Personnel are asking questions that were never asked before. What kind of questions? Why genetic caste determines career options? Why individual initiative is discouraged? Why some species are automatically considered inferior? Morthul's scales shifted to a worried purple. These questions could destabilize our society. Sarah considered her response carefully. Change can be frightening, but it can also lead to improvement. What if asking these questions helps the Empire become stronger? How could questioning fundamental systems make us stronger? Because systems that can't withstand questions aren't as strong as they appear, Sarah said gently. The strongest societies are those that can examine themselves honestly and adapt when necessary. Morthul was quiet for a long moment. You're talking about transforming the Empire into something completely different. I'm talking about helping the Empire become the best version of itself, Sarah corrected. Many of your systems work well and should be preserved, but some might work even better with modifications. What Morthul didn't know was that the questions were spreading faster than anyone realized. Zephyrians who had worked with human specialists were sharing ideas with colleagues. Stories of improved working conditions, better decision-making processes, and increased personal satisfaction were traveling through informal networks across the empire. Junior officials were beginning to implement small changes in their own departments, testing ideas they had learned from humans. Guards were treating citizens with more respect. Administrators were listening to suggestions from lower-ranking staff. Teachers were encouraging students to think critically instead of memorizing information. None of these changes violated Empire law because Empire law had never anticipated the need to prevent people from working together more effectively. On the mining world of Deepstone, engineer Torvex had revolutionized safety protocols after attending one of Lisa Rodriguez's efficiency seminars via hologram. Instead of waiting for orders from headquarters, he began daily safety meetings where any worker could raise concerns or suggest improvements. Production increased. Accidents decreased and worker satisfaction reached levels that mining operations had never seen before. When Imperial inspectors arrived to investigate the unusual reports, they found the operation running so smoothly that they recommended the new procedures be adopted. Empire-wide, the inspectors didn't realize they were recommending the spread of democratic decision-making and worker empowerment throughout Empire industry. On the diplomatic world of Treaty Station, young Administrator Nal Seth had started what she called multi-perspective planning sessions after studying Ahmed Hassan's leadership materials. When negotiating with client species, she included viewpoints from cultural experts, economists, and even client species representatives themselves. 2 years after first contact, the Zephyrian Empire faced something it had never encountered in its 2,000-year history: its own citizens asking for change. Not demanding independence or rebelling against authority, but politely requesting better working conditions, fair advancement opportunities, and meaningful participation in decisions that affected their lives. It started small. On the agricultural world of Green Valley, farming supervisors requested permission to implement worker suggestion programs like the ones used in human-optimized facilities. On the manufacturing planet of Steelworks, engineers asked why genetic caste prevented them from pursuing management training when they clearly had leadership abilities. These requests followed proper protocols and used respectful language. They weren't threats or demands. They were simply questions about why things had to work the way they always had. Foreign Minister Morthul found himself dealing with hundreds of such requests every week. Each was technically reasonable and followed Empire procedures perfectly, but collectively, they represented something unprecedented: an entire civilization asking to become better. The humans have created a problem, he told Emperor Korthes during their weekly briefing. Not through rebellion or subversion, but through success. Our people see the improvements in human-optimized facilities and want the same benefits. The Emperor studied the reports spread across his desk. Productivity was up across all sectors. Citizen satisfaction ratings had reached historical highs. Military effectiveness had improved dramatically. By every measure, the Empire was stronger than it had ever been. What exactly is the problem? Korthes asked. The changes are spreading beyond the controlled programs, Morthul explained. Department heads are implementing human suggestions without authorization. Local administrators are modifying procedures based on human efficiency models. Citizens are expecting treatment that assumes they have value beyond their genetic caste. And the results of these unauthorized changes. Morthul consulted his data tablet. Continued improvement in all performance metrics. No increase in disorder or security threats. If anything, unauthorized implementation of human methods has been more successful than our controlled programs. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. The Empire's strength had always been based on order, hierarchy, and genetic destiny. But the humans had shown that a different kind of order could be more effective. An order based on cooperation rather than control. On Scholar's Rest, Professor Ahmed Hassan received an unusual visitor. Dean Morkala of the Imperial Academy had requested a private meeting, which was highly irregular for someone of her rank. Professor Hassan, she began carefully, I need to understand something. Your teaching methods have produced the most capable graduating class in Academy history, but they are also asking questions that concern the faculty. What kind of questions? Ahmed asked, though he suspected he knew. They question why genetic castes should determine career paths when ability clearly varies within castes. They ask why the best ideas for governing should be ignored simply because they come from lower-ranked individuals. They wonder why the empire doesn't benefit from the full potential of all its citizens. Ahmed nodded thoughtfully. Those are important questions. What concerns you about students who think critically? I'm not concerned about critical thinking, Dean Morkala said. I'm concerned about the implications. If we teach future leaders to value ability over caste, merit over birthright, and cooperation over hierarchy, we will inevitably change the fundamental nature of our society. And would that necessarily be bad? The dean was quiet for a moment. No, she said finally. It would probably be better. That's what frightens me. Similar conversations were happening across the empire. Leaders who had spent their lives maintaining the old system were realizing that the new approaches produced better results. But embracing change meant admitting that their traditional methods had been flawed. On Nexus Prime, Sarah Chen was preparing for what she knew would be her most important meeting yet. Emperor Korthus had requested a private audience to discuss the future of human-empire relations. She entered the throne room to find it nearly empty. Only the Emperor, Foreign Minister Morthul, and a few essential guards were present. Even Coffee the Kulith had been allowed to accompany her, padding silently across the vast floor. Ambassador Chen, the Emperor began, your species has fulfilled its promises remarkably well. Our efficiency has improved, our productivity has increased, and our citizen satisfaction has reached unprecedented levels. We're honored to have contributed to the Empire's success, Sarah replied, but you have also created what some might call a crisis. Our people now expect treatment and opportunities that our traditional systems cannot provide, while maintaining their fundamental structure. Sarah had anticipated this moment. Your Majesty, may I ask what you believe is more important, maintaining traditional structures or ensuring the Empire's continued strength and prosperity? Are you suggesting those goals are incompatible? I'm suggesting they might be more compatible than you realize. Strong societies adapt to serve their people better. Structures that can't evolve eventually become weaknesses rather than strengths. The Emperor studied her for a long moment. You're asking us to transform our entire civilization. I'm suggesting that your civilization is already transforming itself. Human consultants have simply provided tools and ideas. Your people are choosing to use them because they produce better results. Foreign Minister Morthul stepped forward. The changes are happening with or without our approval. We can either guide the transformation or risk losing control entirely. What do you propose? The Emperor asked Sarah. Sarah activated a holographic display showing a comprehensive plan she had been developing for months. The Great Reform, a systematic transition to merit-based advancement, cooperative decision-making, and optimized resource allocation. The Empire retains its structure and authority, but operates on principles that maximize the potential of all citizens. The plan was detailed and practical, addressing economic concerns, security requirements, and cultural sensitivities. It showed how the Empire could become more democratic without becoming chaotic, more fair without losing effectiveness. This would represent the most significant change in our society since the Empire's founding, Morthul observed. Yes, Sarah agreed. But consider the alternative. Change is already happening. You can guide it toward positive outcomes, or you can resist it and risk uncontrolled upheaval. Emperor, Korthus studied the holographic plans with the same intensity he had shown 2 years earlier, when Sarah first presented her optimization suggestions. The transformation she proposed was massive, but it built on the success of smaller changes that had already proven effective. If we implement this great reform, he said slowly, what role would humanity play in the new structure? Partnership, Sarah replied. Not as rulers or subjects, but as equals working together for mutual benefit. The reformed empire would be stronger than any single species could be alone. The Emperor made his decision with the same bold wisdom that had kept him in power for 3 centuries. We will announce the Great Reform. The Empire will evolve to better serve all its citizens while maintaining the stability and strength that have made us great. 6 months later, the announcement sent shockwaves throughout known space. The Zephyrian Empire was voluntarily reforming itself, based on principles of cooperation, merit, and mutual benefit. Genetic castes would be abolished gradually. Career advancement would be based on ability and performance. Local communities would have meaningful input in decisions that affected them. Most remarkably, the Empire invited other species to join as equal partners in what they now called the Galactic Cooperative. Dozens of species that had been client states or had avoided contact with the Empire entirely began requesting membership in the new organization. The transformation wasn't instant or perfect. Some regions adapted faster than others. Some officials resisted change while others embraced it enthusiastically. But the overall trend was clear. The Empire was becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. A voluntary alliance of species that governed through cooperation rather than domination. Sarah. Chen stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime, now renamed Harmony Station, watching ships from 50 different worlds dock at the station's expanded bays. Coffee the Q-Lith sat beside her, his purple fur catching the light from distant stars. "Do you think they understand what really happened?" asked Dr. Marcus Webb, who had been assigned as humanity's permanent representative to the Cooperative Council. "They understand that cooperation works better than control," Sarah replied. "They understand that people perform better when they're treated with respect and given opportunities to grow. They understand that diversity makes systems stronger. But do they understand that we essentially talked an entire galactic empire into becoming a democracy?" Sarah smiled. "I think they understand that we helped them become the best version of themselves. The choice to change was theirs. We just showed them what was possible." In the end, the Empire learned that humanity's most dangerous weapon was not technology or military might. It was their ability to inspire hope and demonstrate that change was possible.